All right, so today we journey through chapter 17 of Shemot. That's Exodus, if you don't know, where we find a story, the third story, I should say, of God's provision for the children of Israel and their total lack of trust, of course, in his ability and willingness to provide. It's hard to tell if they were more worried about his ability or if they were more worried about his willingness. I kind of tend to think it's the willingness. It's like we all believe God is all powerful and can do anything, and you would certainly believe that if you saw him split the Reed Sea and drown Pharaoh's army and all that stuff. So probably it's more about them worrying, is he willing? Okay. Pisuto makes a point that we're going to see in verse 1. He says that we are also told here that the children of Israel are not taken on a journey that seems right to Moshe, but rather the journey was by the will and direction of God. And if you listen closely, you'll catch it. So we begin at Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 17, verse 1. This is my translation of the Hebrew text. And all the Adat, all the congregations, I should say Adat, not E-dot, Ad, that's an A, Adat, all the congregations of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after they broke camp. It says, on the mouth of Yahweh. Of course, that's an idiom, so it's at the command of Yahweh. That's where Pisuto gets what he said. And they set up camp in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Now, verse 2 says, and the people, it's the people, squabbled with Moshe, and they said, you give us water, and we will drink. And Moshe said to them, why are you squabbling with me? Why do you test Yahweh? The people. It has been said by some that since the text says the people, it was only some of the people who squabbled, since the previous complaint came from the whole assembly. However, the direct object is connected to the Hebrew word as in ha'am, or the people. The people are the entire assembly of Israel. It's a different way of saying exactly the same thing. These are not two different points. So the argument falls short. Still, it is right in that it was hyperbolic, or an exaggerated statement. There can be little doubt that Moshe and Aharon did not complain against themselves. Just saying. So it's not the whole people, it's not the whole congregation. They're right to that degree, but not for the reason they gave. Anyway, Pisuto said that the people were not content merely to murmur, but rose up against Moshe to quarrel. So you're talking about, this is an argument. This is red-faced, yelling and screaming. This is the left-wingers yelling at the conservative Moshe. Yeah, you get the idea. He also said that the text indicates that the people felt that since Moshe brought them into the wilderness, he was obligated to give them water, to which Moshe basically responded, your quarrel with me had no justification. I brought you out of Egypt at the Lord's command, not mine. So you see where Pisuto's getting that. It was at the mouth of God. In other words, God gave the command. He was the one who said, let's camp here. Let's pack up and let's go there. Now we'll camp here. That was all at the command of God. Moshe was not just meandering through the wilderness willy-nilly, filling whatever need or desire, narcissistic desire he may have had. No, it was nothing like that. Moshe was simply obeying God. Verse 3, and the people thirsted there for water, and the people dwelt on Moshe. Do you remember this idiom? They complained to him. That's to dwell on, is to complain to him or complain about him. And said, to what is that? Well, that doesn't make any sense in English, does it? What they mean is, they said, why have? To what is that? We would say in English, why have? And the next, you brought us from Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst. You know, if you gave them about 3 more days to come up with more stuff, it would have been to kill us, to kill the livestock, to kill the children, to kill the children's children, to kill the mice, to kill the squirrels. You know, they just would have thought. You see, they're building it up. They're making it worse and worse and worse, right? Because that's what complaining does. That's what the old backbiting and the story just gets bigger and bigger, right? The Seal said that verse 3 tells us nothing new. And this is very important that we understand this lesson about Hebrew. He said it's nothing new, nor is it another recension of the narrative. It gives us, in accordance with the established literary practice, a detailed account after the general statement in verse 2, in conformity with biblical style. In English, we have this thing, and it's a real big thing. You guys know that I went first to Hebrew college, and then I went through a seminary. And in the seminary, they taught us this. They taught us, okay, so it says, love God with all your heart. There's bullet point 1. Love him with all your soul. There's bullet point 2. And love him with all your strength. There's bullet point 3. And now we're going to break down each of those bullet points and talk about the differences between them. And what Kasuto's saying is, no, 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 that's not how it works in Hebrew. Yes, that's how Plato did it. This is not how Jews do it. Jews say the same thing in 3 different ways so that it adds emphasis. Or in this case, they give a general statement, and then in the next verse, they give the details of the previous general statement. It is very consistent with the biblical Hebrew style. They are not bullet points. So this is not something new. This is a more detailed information on the previous verse. Verse 4. And Moshe cried out to Yahweh, saying, what will I do with this people? Yet a little stone me. Huh? Okay. Let's make this make sense in English. What shall I do with this people? Soon they will stone me. Right? Because they speak differently in Hebrew. They don't have to say as many words as we do. So he didn't need to say that. All he said was, yet a little, they stone me. And literally didn't really say they, but that's inferred by the way the word is spelled. Soon, well, yet a little, stone me is really all that was said. So we would say, soon they will stone me. So the word cried out, Onkelos changed that from cried out to prayed. He also added the Aramaic word pos, changing the meaning from they will stone me to they might stone me. He had a real problem with the Jews looking bad. He was always trying to do a little something to make them look a little better. I don't think that's good form. I think that you should leave it the way it is. Because this particular bunch of people were a little out of control. You would be too if you'd been in hard slavery for 430 years, and now for the first time you're out here, trying to figure it all out, and it's stuff you've never seen or heard of before. I hope you can give these people some leeway in your mind for that, but you don't need to change the Word of God for that. So then they yet a little stone me. Rashi took that to mean soon they will stone me. He took that to mean that if God didn't do something real soon, Moshe would have been stoned. Even Ezra took it to mean that if they had the power, they would have stoned Moshe. This statement is hyperbolic. That's what they're missing. It's a hyperbolic statement. It was written this way to show the intensity of the people's discontent. It was not meant to be taken literally. It's like cats and dogs falling out of the sky. That doesn't mean the cats and dogs are really falling out of the sky. And just because you're saying soon they will stone me does not mean that they're really going to stone you. It's just a hyperbolic way of saying it's getting pretty intense down here, God. That's all that is. Verse 5. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Passover, that's my Yahweh voice, Passover. I'm sorry, I can't keep it up. So it says Passover before the people. What does that mean? That means Passover in the presence of the people, and take with you from the Ziknei, that's the elders, from the Ziknei, of Israel. So take some people, not all of the elders of Israel, just some of them. Take with you some of them. And it says, and your rod, which you struck in the river, because remember, he put it in the river because the water was bad. He made the water good. Take that rod, take it in your hand, and go. So the Zikne, what's said of that, the Mechilta, I said it wrong, the Mechilta said that the elders would testify that Moshe was the reason for the water and that there had been no water prior to him striking the rock. I wouldn't say I disagree. I'd say there's pretty good reason to believe that, but again, they're basically pulling that out of thin air. There's nothing here saying that that's the purpose for it. God could have had a completely different purpose for it. But we would assume, and that's all this is an assumption, is that they were to witness that the water wasn't pouring out until Moshe struck the rock. Nachmanides pointed out that this event took place while the Yehudim were camped at Rephidim. And this is very important. They were camped at Rephidim while the rock which Moshe struck was in Horeb. This is quite a little distance between, which means that Moshe went to Horeb with some of the Zikne, some of the elders, long before the rest of the Yehudim arrived. The Jews, the Yehudim. So there's something left way much, much time and space here left out of this story. We don't know if he went there and broke the rock and then came back, or if he went there later with these elders, with these particular elders, with everybody with him. We don't really know. The story doesn't tell us. The text tells us that the Yehudim did not arrive at Sinai until the third new moon. So either the children of Israel went without water for more than a month and were thus exaggerating the lack of water, or the Zikne brought back water with them, or the rock followed them back. Either way, the Zikne obviously went with Moshe to be, for whatever reason, to be witnesses of a miracle, to be anointed there. Who knows? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. But they went with him, and they witnessed for sure the water coming from the rock, because they were with him when he hit the rock. So they did witness that, which would no doubt have helped to calm the fears of the Yehudim, of the Jews, about the possibilities of actually running out of water. So just a lot of stuff to think there. There is a lot of time and space there that's missing. Information that's just not there. Then the words "and go." Remember at the end of it, God said, "Take them and go." The Seforno added to the words "and go." At the end of it, they added "from the camp of Rephidim to the rocks of Horeb." They just added it for clarity. Hopefully they put that in some parentheses so people know that's not really part of the text. Verse 6, "Behold, I stand there." This is God speaking. "Behold, I stand there in," well, it's "I stand there before you," is how it's really said. And you get it. "I stand there in your presence on the cliff in Horeb, and you will strike the rock." I'll never forget a preacher saying one time that Moshe to touch the rock, and he struck it, and that's why Moshe didn't get to go into the promised land. The text actually says he struck the rock. It actually says God told him that he was supposed to hit the rock. I'm just saying. Oh, man. "And water shall go out from it, and the people will drink." And Moshe did so to the eyes of the Zikne of Israel. So he did it in their sight. He did it where they could see what he had done. The word "strike the rock," Rashi said that since the text literally said "strike the rock," it shows us that the rod was made of a hard material such as sapphire. Well, this statement is so funny and yet so stupid, it must have been a joke. And I really truly hope for Rashi's sake that it was a joke. Please don't take that seriously. The water did not come out because something hard hit the rock. It came out because God made it come out. In his book, A Commentary on the Book of Exodus, Umberto Moshe David Cassuto wrote the following. Several commentators have already mentioned a similar occurrence in our own time, namely that on the mountain called by the Arabs Jebel Musa, which means the mountain of Moses, which is identified in their tradition with Mount Sinai, there was suddenly opened up a stream of running well water through the breaking of a thin layer of rock. Not long ago, he said, too, an English officer saw with his own eyes in a wadi, it's like a I want to say valley, but it's not really a valley, it's like a dried river, dried river bottom, yeah, a wadi in the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula. A company of the Sudanese Camel Corps digging in the gravel heaped up by the side of a cliff in order to discover the source of the water that was dripping between the pebbles, when suddenly, after a hard knock with an axe that broke the outer face of the cliff, numerous cavities were revealed in the stone from which an abundance of water began to gush. Moses went up the slope of the wadi and reached the rock of Horeb, which was apparently the site whence in normal times the waters of the wadi, now temporarily arrested, used to flow. And Moses did so, and he was commanded in the sight of the elders of Israel, and water issued from the rock in abundance. The stream of the wadi began to flow as usual, and its waters reached the encampment of the people, and they drank their fill thereof. It is an interesting theory here in that they're saying Moshe left where they were, went over to Horeb, hit the rock, the water came out and flowed down that wadi all the way back to the people. That is certainly a possibility. But what bothers me about this is that Umberto is basically making something he knows from his world fit in God's world. He's taking something from his world and shoving it into the Bible. And I think this is really bad form. And I love Umberto, don't get me wrong. He's since passed, which is, I guess, why he didn't do anything beyond Genesis and Exodus. And that's sad. I would love to have had his work beyond that. But he didn't do that because he passed on. But here's the one thing about him that I really have trouble with is that he's always trying to make everything that God did a natural occurrence. And so it takes God's ability to just call it something as that is not as though it were, and it was. It takes all of that away from him, and God is confined somehow to this box of, oh, he can only make natural events cause things. I have a real problem with this thinking, because here you have a problem. Now we're taking these events and moving them to Jebel Musa, which is not the right place. But now we're going to move this over here, and all of archaeology has to change everything it believes. Everything in the Bible has to change, because now everything has to fit this preconceived idea. And I think we're going down a dangerous road when we start doing these things. God did this where he said he did it, and he did it the way he said he did it. And he didn't need the help of anything natural to make it happen. Now, if it was something natural, that's fine. But it would have been an eclipse where God said it was, and perhaps that water did flow back to the people. It is, I like his idea there that the water flowed back to the people, because it does say that they were out of water. And it never says anything about him bringing the water back. It doesn't say anything about how they would have done that. What, do they hire some water company to fill up their trucks? I'm just saying. I mean, I like the implication here that when he broke the rock, the water went back to the people. I really like that, because it is, I think, a very rational conclusion. But the whole taking God's power away from him, I don't like or agree with in any way. Verse 7, and he, speaking of Moshe, called the name of that place Massa and Meribah, because of the squabbling of the children of Israel, and because they tested Yahweh, saying, is Yahweh in the midst of us or not? Wow, that's a dangerous thing to say, don't you think? Neither Onkelos nor Sadia treat the words Massa and Meriva as places, but as descriptions of the events which took place. I absolutely agree with this. But that doesn't mean they couldn't be names as well. But I do agree that they were called this to describe the events, and not called this because that was what the name of the place should be called. Anyway, I don't know that that makes a lot of difference, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. Now we're back to the word that is Yahweh in the midst of us. Is God with us or not? Rashbam thought this statement was idiomatic, meaning, will God give us water or not? And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but the question truly is, has God left us here to die, or will he tend to our needs? I think it's more broad than Rashbam made it. Onkelos changed, is Yahweh with us, to, is the Shekinah of God with us? Don't ask me. The Sadia changed it to, is the glory of God with us? Why? Why? I don't understand this. Why are we changing the Word of God? What is wrong with the Word of God? How is everything that's perfect and pure not coming out of the mouth of God? If we know that it's perfect and pure coming out of the mouth of God, why are we changing it? What do we think we're doing to something perfect and pure if we're changing it? I'm just throwing it out there. Verse 8, then Amalek went out and made war with Israel in Rephidim. So they're obviously still in Rephidim. They haven't gone to Horeb yet. Moshe obviously did, but they hadn't. Some argue that the fact that this verse follows the one previous, is God with us or not, shows that God was punishing the Yehudim for their doubt. I think this way of looking at things misses the true nature of God, in that right after the children of Israel open themselves up to punishment, because you do, when you sin, you open yourself up to punishment. And testing God or tempting God or whatever it is you want to call it, they call it both things, I think, in the English. Doubting God is what it is. When you begin to doubt God and you say these things out loud, you have opened yourself to punishment. But God not only provided, or not only proved rather, that he was among them by giving them a victory that they couldn't have won on their own, but it also shows God's great mercy, compassion, and patience toward his children, even when they're being boo-boo heads. It should bring great comfort to us, knowing that God does not just throw us to the wolves that we invite into our homes when we mess up, but rather protects us if we reach out to him. Even more astounding, we're going to find out real quick, is that God will allow our friends and families to help hold us up when we are too weak to do it on our own. Verse 9, and Moshe said to Yehoshua, choose from us, men who will go and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Now check this out. Yehoshua, the son of Nun, was called Hoshea, the son of Nun in Devarim, or Deuteronomy 44, prompting some to argue that Moshe changed his servant's name, because there can't be a mistake in the Bible. So since there's no chance of that, Moshe changed his name. They got to have some way to harmonize. Well, sure, but maybe someone just misspelled his name. Just thinking out loud here, human beings did write it after all. Then he said, choose from us, or choose of us. Now Rashi said that the word us denotes Moshe and Yehoshua. And thus Moshe saw Yehoshua as an equal. Wow. But by this logic, Moshe and Yehoshua would have been the only two from which to choose men to go fight. So he would be saying, either you're going to go fight them or I'm going to go fight them. Let's not worry about all these guys here in Israel that can help us. No, we'll go do it ourselves. The us here are the children of Israel. Was not Moshe a child of Israel? Was not Hosea or Yehoshua a child of Israel? Yeah, they were. So the us was the children of Israel. Choose men from among the children of Israel. The men whom Yehoshua chose are the men who fought. Yehoshua was not an equal of Moshe. He was his servant. Then it says, go and fight. Rashi and even Ezra both thought this meant that these men would go out from behind the cloud to fight. But by this logic, was Amalek getting past the cloud to come in to make war? How was he making war if they're behind the cloud? No. Yehoshua was just picking men brave enough to trust in God and go out and fight. These men were slaves, not warriors. So it took some real bravery, didn't it? I mean, the most deadly thing these people probably wielded was a hoe and a rake, maybe a knife to cut meat, butter knife or something. These were not warriors. So it took some intestinal fortitude, let's put it that way. Onkelos Shemot by Drazin Wagner says the following. The biblical phrase can be read, go out and battle Amalek tomorrow, or it can be read, tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill, since there is no punctuation in the Hebrew Bible text. In the Hebrew Bible text. Since there is no punctuation in the Hebrew Bible text. There is no punctuation in the Hebrew Bible. Did I mention that there's no punctuation in the Hebrew Bible? And for that matter, there's no punctuation in the Greek New Testament. None. If you're looking at Greek text that has a punctuation in it, you're looking at somebody's translation. You're not looking at the original. By the way, there is no original. I'm just saying. Just thinking out loud here. It goes on to say, in the Babylonian Talmud, Yoma 51a and b, it is recorded that this is one of the 5 verses in the Torah that could be punctuated in either one way or the other. The reason why it can be punctuated in one way or the other is because in Hebrew it doesn't matter. The phrase can be read, go out and battle Amalek tomorrow. Okay? Or it can be read, tomorrow, go out, and it can be read, go out and battle Amalek tomorrow, comma, I will stand on the top of the hill. Or it can be read, go out and battle Amalek, comma, tomorrow I will go out and stand on the hill. Why does it make any difference? Why shouldn't it make any difference? Why can it be read both ways? Because no matter how you read it, you're going to fight Amalek tomorrow, and tomorrow he's going to be standing on top of the hill. It doesn't matter. They don't need a comma because it doesn't change the meaning. Both ways of thinking are correct. Tomorrow they will fight, and tomorrow he will stand on the top of the hill. There was no need for a comma. So when we start trying to put a comma in a place where there's no need for a comma, then we're trying to make it say 2 different things. And it doesn't say 2 different things. It says the same thing. Anyway, that happens more than 5 times, by the way. It happens quite often because in Hebrew it doesn't matter. If you understand it both ways, then you understand it properly. If you're trying to make it one or the other, you don't understand it at all. All right, let's see. He said that the Talmud in Yoma 51a and b, it is recorded that this is one of the 5 in the Torah that could be punctuated in either way or another. Centuries after the Talmud, he goes on to say, the Masoretes introduced cantillations, which were musical notes used in the public reading of the Torah on Sabbath festivals, the beginning of a new month, and on Mondays and Thursdays. These cantillations served as a form of biblical punctuation because the notes indicated when to pause in the reading of the verse. Okay, so you see that this is something from the 1900s, the mid to late 1900s being forced into the Bible. I hope you know that, because it wasn't until the mid to the late 1900s that taking a breath was where we put a comma. That is not proper English. Teachers started teaching that, what, in the 60s or so? It was after so more like the 70s. So in the 70s, 1970s, teachers began to teach that you put the comma where you take a breath. No, no, no. That is not what taking a breath does. Because what if you have a breathing problem? You're going to be putting some commas in some really weird places, right? That is not the proper use of a comma. So he's wrong about this. The cantillations were pauses. It was musical notation because they read it as a song. And the Lord said, go out and murderize and kill and destroy. Yeah. Come on now. Hopefully you get it. It was about the beat of the rhythm of the way you read. It had nothing to do with where the comma went. Anyway, because in Hebrew you didn't need a comma. Just point that out. Verse 10. And Yehoshua did that which Moshe said to him, to fight with Amalek. And Moshe and Aharon and Hur went up to the head of the hill. The Talmud in Sota 11b says that Hur was the son of Miriam and Caleb. They say Caleb these days, but Caleb is how you actually say it. I don't know where they get that, but cool beans. 11. It is come to pass that as Moshe raised his hand, Israel prevailed. And as Moshe rested his hand, Amalek prevailed. And the hands of Moshe weighed down. You know, they got heavy. Because how long are you going to be able to hold your hands out until that starts getting heavy? Just saying. And the hands of Moshe weighed down. And they took a stone and placed it under him. And Moshe sat on it. And Aharon and Hur supported his hands from this one and from this one. You got to understand that means on one side and on the other. And his hands were faithful until the sun went down. What does that mean? It means his hands were steady. Idioms, right? It's the way you speak in Hebrew. But the phrase, and the hands of Moshe weighed down, to that phrase, Rashi believed that Moshe's arms became heavy as a punishment from God because Moshe sent Yehoshua to lead the war instead of leading it himself. I am stunned with the seeming unending desire to find fault in Moshe by the sages. It leaves me dumbfounded. Moshe was at least 80 years old when this event took place. By the way, how long did Rashi think this war was supposed to last? 10, 15 seconds? I wonder if Rashi would have needed someone to hold his arms up, and if so, for what sin? This is just beyond ridiculous. And you know, Rashi's kind of my favorite of all of the sages, but boy, sometimes he just got out in left field, and it makes me wonder, did Rashi really say that, or did somebody else come along and add a few things? Anyway, this verse is not an indictment of Moshe's sins. It is a great object lesson in that it shows us that while we may not be able to hold up physically against our enemies, God has shown us that our brothers can help us stand. Remember that? Here we have it. And then it says a stone. Now Rashi is going to switch from Moshe being punished for his sins to Moshe being a martyr for the people. He said that Moshe's desire to share in his people's hardships and refuse to be seated on a soft seat. And I'm thinking, I think somebody just forgot to bring the lawn chairs. Help myself out. Just saying. Then where it says faithful, Rashi said that the Hebrew word emunah literally meant faith. Thus, Moshe remained firm in prayer and full of faith in God. Nachmanides said that his hands remained lifted. I agree with Nachmanides. The Hebrew word emunah actually means faithful. It does not mean faith. There is no place in the entire Hebrew Bible. And for that matter, there's no place in the entire New Testament Greek where, were we to translate it into Hebrew, where it would mean faith. The idea and concept of faith comes much later in history. It did not exist in the biblical period. It did not exist in the first century CE. It did not exist. It was faithfulness. So that's the true meaning. The idea of believing and thus receiving, in other words, the idea of Moshe remained full of faith in God, is actually stolen from Christianity. It is stolen from Christianity. This is a Christian idea. This is not a Jewish idea. There is no biblical use of emunah for the idea of faith or belief as it is known today. Nowhere. Not one time. You got to leave it out. Change it to faithfulness every time if you want to understand it. And for the Christians, do the same thing in the New Testament. You'll begin to see that book in a completely different light, as you should. There was only faithfulness. So if his arms were faithful in this verse, then we should recognize it as an idiom that means steady. Moshe's hands were steady until the sun went down. Verse 13. Yehoshua prostrated Amalek and his people at the mouth of a sword. Now, had they have translated this right, this sentence would have made sense, but they didn't translate it right. Instead of using the word prostrate in English like they should have, they used the word weakened. Come on, people. To prostrate Amalek and his people at the mouth of a sword was an idiomatic way of saying Yehoshua left Amalek and his people dead on the ground. It was an absolute slaughter of the people who were there at the time. And some of them would have run off, right? They wouldn't have all been killed. It's just the ones that were killed it was a slaughter. Verse 14. And Yahweh said to Moshe, write this in a scroll as a reminder, and establish it in the ear of Yehoshua. For blotting, I will blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Let me read that again. For blotting, I will blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. I will. Not that I did, but I will. So, to the words established in the ear of Yehoshua, Kasuto said that it is self-understood that Moshe established it in the ear of Yehoshua. You should know that if God told Moshe to do it, Moshe did it. Yehoshua understood it. Verse 15. And Moshe built an altar and called its name Yahweh Nisi. Yahweh Nisi. And he said, because, and I added the words, he stretched out his hand in the throne of Yah, Yahweh will make war with Amalek from around. So does it make sense, right? What that means is Yahweh will make war with Amalek for several generations, meaning that after several generations, Amalek will be wiped from the face of this planet. Because he deserved it, because he was this awful, terrible person that just needed God to pound in the ground. No, because it was like Paro. He wouldn't give up. He wouldn't give in. He wouldn't leave the Yehudim alone, and God had to just wipe him completely off the face of the earth. All they had to do was just leave the Yehudim alone, and things would have gone well with them, but they wouldn't do it. Much like the Palestinians. At some point, if this keeps on, they will be wiped from the face of the earth. And it's really not the Palestinians doing it so much as it's all the Arabs. Think about this. There is no actual place called Palestine. There never has been. Even with the Palestinian people being there, the ones they call Palestinian, I hope you know that in the 30s and 40s, the Jews were the Palestinians. They were the ones that lived in the area we call Palestine. They were actually called Palestinians. They were forced out of that area, and the Arabs came in. Now, the Arabs tell this story different, but this is the actual story. And so they come in, and it wasn't until Yasser Arafat that they started calling themselves Palestinians again. And it was all propaganda. From that time till this day, to this very day, they still have not renamed that place Palestine. They're not about to. It's basically against their culture and their religion. They're not going to do it. They're just using it because Americans are dumb enough to believe it. And that's the truth. That's just the straightforward, awful truth of it. So, think about this. They're fighting over this piece of land. They act like it's so important to them. All they ever talk about, if you can listen to them in their language, is destroying Israel and wiping all of Israel off the map. They don't care that they'll destroy the Temple Mount and their mosque on it. It doesn't mean anything to them. But because if they say it does, the West will back them up. And the West has backed them up. While Obama was there, the West backed them up to a degree that was terrifying to me. But with the new president, that's backed off a little bit, and that's good. But think about it. The problem is not that they want that piece of land. The problem is these are all the Arabs that are all mixed blood. Because to the Arabs, blood is everything. That's why the Sunnis are always trying to kill the Shiites. Or it's the other way around. The Shiites are always trying to kill the Sunnis. Or vice versa. I mean, it happens both ways. But everybody's trying to get their pure blood, right? You have no idea how much this is all about the blood. And so since these Arabs don't fit anywhere else, if they went to any of these other places, they'd be put to death. Yes, they would. They would be killed. Because the Arabs don't like them and don't want them. The only reason why they let them live and leave them there is because they can use them as a pawn against Israel. The Arabs have all kinds of land. They have land that has no oil under it. They could set aside some land over there and say, hey, Palestinians, why don't you come over here and live here in this land? And they could just let them be, and all would be well. Palestinians would actually be happy with that. But they're not going to do it because they're just being used as a pawn. And if they ever get to the place where they could actually wipe Israel out, they would kill off all of the Palestinians too. Don't make any mistake about it. It's exactly what they would do. Anyway, it's because they won't leave Israel alone. They got wiped out. It takes several generations, but that's the end result. And it may well be the end result for a lot of Arabs at some point. I'm not sure about that because God promised to take care of the Arabs. So, because Abraham kicked his son out and all that. So I don't really can't be sure there on that. But that was the case with Amalek. He was a part of the family. All right. So now this concludes chapter 17. Shalom, shalom, y'all.